The stormy night of June 13, 1886, will forever be etched in the annals of Bavarian history. It was on this fateful evening that the lifeless body of King Ludwig II was pulled from the depths of Lake Starnberg, a tranquil and picturesque lake located just outside of Munich. Not far away, the body of his personal physician, Dr. Bernhard von Gudin, was also discovered. The king's body was found floating face down, his eyes frozen in a permanent stare, his once regal demeanor now replaced with a haunting stillness. The official verdict swiftly declared it a suicide by drowning, yet the circumstances of two men dying in such shallow water immediately ignited suspicion. How did the fairy tale king, known for his grand castles and opera patronage, meet such a tragic and mysterious end at Berg Castle? The questions surrounding the disappearance of his beloved Dr. Gudin only deepened the public's unease. No one was prepared for the web of secrets and political intrigue that would soon unravel, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions that would haunt Bavaria for generations to come. The mystery of King Ludwig's death would become a dark and enduring chapter in the history of the Wittelsbach dynasty, and one that would continue to fascinate and disturb us to this day. As we delve into the story of Mad King Ludwig, we'll explore the intricate details of his life, his reign, and his ultimate demise, and examine the lasting impact it had on Bavaria and the world. But for now, the question remains, what really happened on that stormy night in 1886? The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. To understand the events that led to King Ludwig's tragic demise, we must first delve into his life, a life of luxury, extravagance, and romance. Born on August 25, 1845, in Nymphenburg Palace, Munich, King Ludwig II was the eldest son of King Maximilian II and Queen Marie of Prussia. From a young age, Ludwig was fascinated by the arts, music, and architecture, a passion that led him to become a prolific and eccentric patron of the arts. He famously championed Richard Wagner, sponsoring his operas and even providing a home for the controversial composer, much to the chagrin of his cabinet and the Bavarian populace who resented the enormous expense. This deep immersion in aesthetics and creative projects led him to construct some of the world's most breathtaking castles, including the iconic Neuschwanstein, the opulent Linderhof, and the unfinished Herrenchiemsee, each a testament to his boundless imagination. But beneath the surface of his fairy tale world, Ludwig's life was not without its challenges and controversies, particularly his increasing disinterest in practical governance, often avoiding state council meetings and refusing public appearances. These challenges, from escalating state debts to political isolation, would ultimately contribute to his downfall. As we explore the intricacies of King Ludwig's life, we'll examine the complex web of relationships, alliances, and rivalries that defined his reign, and the ways in which these factors contributed to his tragic demise. But for now, let us return to the early days of Ludwig's life and the events that shaped him into the complex, enigmatic figure he would become. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. In the mid-19th century, Bavaria was a kingdom in flux, with the old monarchies and empires of Europe struggling to maintain their power and influence in a rapidly changing world. The Industrial Revolution was transforming the economy and society, and the rise of nationalism and liberalism was creating new challenges and opportunities for the monarchies. King Ludwig II, with his romantic and eccentric nature, was both a product of this world and a reaction against it. He was a monarch who preferred the company of artists, musicians, and writers to that of politicians and diplomats. His immersive architectural projects and operatic obsessions increasingly caused him to withdraw from political life, neglecting state affairs and refusing to engage with his cabinet or open the Landtag parliament. This growing reclusiveness and his soaring personal debts, which by the 1880s threatened to bankrupt the royal household, put him in direct conflict with his government. Prime Minister Johann von Lutz, in particular, grew alarmed by the king's financial recklessness and his waning interest in state duties, especially as Bavaria navigated its delicate position within the newly unified German Empire. This deepening chasm between Ludwig's private, artistic world and the harsh political and financial realities of the state would ultimately contribute to his downfall. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we delve deeper into the story of King Ludwig, we'll explore the complex web of historical events and social changes that defined his reign, and the ways in which these factors contributed to his tragic demise. But for now, let us examine the intricate details of Ludwig's world and the ways in which it shaped him into the complex, enigmatic figure he would become. The world of 19th century Bavaria was a complex, fascinating place, full of contradictions and paradoxes, and it was this world that would ultimately shape the course of King Ludwig's life and the fate that awaited him. As King Ludwig II's reign progressed, the first warning signs of his mental and emotional instability began to appear. His nocturnal lifestyle became more pronounced, with ministers often having to wait until late into the night for an audience, if they were granted one at all. He grew increasingly reclusive, preferring the company of loyal servants to his own family or courtiers, and showed a growing distrust towards his government, communicating often through cryptic notes or demanding that his officials be replaced. His personal debts, exacerbated by his elaborate building projects, had soared to over 14 million marks by 1885, a sum that began to threaten the Bavarian state finances and caused severe friction with the Landtag, which consistently refused further loans. Despite these glaring red flags, Prince Leopold, Ludwig's uncle and eventual regent, initially struggled to gain support for intervention. But it was not until Ludwig's behavior became truly alarming, including threats to dismiss his entire cabinet and an incident where he reportedly attacked a stable hand, that his inner circle began to consider drastic measures. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we delve deeper into the story of King Ludwig, we'll examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to his downfall, and the ways in which his loved ones and officials failed to intervene. But for now, let us examine the first signs of trouble and the ways in which they were ignored or dismissed. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a series of strange and disturbing letters written by the king to his officials, in which he expressed his deepening sense of isolation and despair. These letters, which were initially dismissed as the ravings of a madman, would later be recognized as a cry for help, a desperate attempt by the king to reach out to those around him and to find some sense of connection and understanding. As the years passed, King Ludwig II's behavior became increasingly erratic and disturbing. He began to experience vivid and terrifying hallucinations, and his sense of reality began to slip away, often believing himself to be Louis XIV of France or a divine sovereign, removed from earthly concerns. His complete withdrawal from state functions and public life created a power vacuum, leading to growing political instability, with cabinet ministers like Johann von Lutz finding it impossible to govern. This forced the cabinet to act. They sought a medical opinion. Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, a respected psychiatrist from Munich, was tasked with assessing the king's mental state. However, the resulting Ärztliches Gutachten, a medical certificate declaring Ludwig insane, was controversially drafted solely on witness accounts and anecdotes, without Gudden ever personally examining the monarch. This document became the cornerstone of the government's justification for declaring Ludwig incapable of ruling, citing his delusional grandiosity, his threats against ministers and servants, and his catastrophic financial management. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we delve deeper into the story of King Ludwig, we'll examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to his downfall and the calculated steps taken by his government. But for now, let us examine the escalation of the king's madness and the ways in which it threatened to destroy everything around him. The king's psychological deterioration was a gradual and terrifying process, marked by moments of lucidity and coherence, followed by episodes of intense and disturbing psychosis. As the king's condition worsened, his government was faced with a daunting and impossible task: how to save the kingdom from a ruler who actively undermined its stability. As King Ludwig II's psychological state deepened into severe instability, his government, particularly Prime Minister Johann von Lutz, grew convinced that his continued rule posed an existential threat to Bavaria. Seeing the king's condition as a direct danger to the state's finances and sovereignty within the German Empire, they initiated a concerted effort to depose him. Ludwig's complete refusal to engage in governance, often canceling cabinet meetings, dismissing urgent state documents, and threatening officials, created a political paralysis that could no longer be ignored. The decisive act of this betrayal was the secret compilation of the Arschliches Gutachten, the medical certificate declaring him insane. Minister Lutz and his cabinet secretly gathered testimonies from Ludwig's disgruntled servants, former valets, and even some royal family members, detailing his erratic behavior and delusion. This information, provided to Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, allowed him to compose the damning report without a direct examination of the king himself, raising immediate questions about its ethical and legal validity. This document was then wielded as the primary legal justification to declare Ludwig incapable of ruling, effectively staging a calculated governmental coup. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we delve deeper into the story of King Ludwig, we'll examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to his downfall and the calculated political machinations of his cabinet. But for now, let us examine the betrayal of trust and the ways in which it contributed to the king's tragic demise. The betrayal of trust was a gradual and devastating process, marked by moments of deceit and political maneuvering. The cabinet under Minister Lutz now saw the king as an unacceptable risk to their own power and the stability of Bavaria. They conspired against him, strategically utilizing his mental state to manipulate public opinion and legally justify his removal for their own gain. The turning point in King Ludwig II's story came on June 10, 1886, when a royal commission, led by Count Halnstein and accompanied by Dr. Bernhard von Gudden and 3 other medical professionals, arrived at Neuschwanstein Castle with orders to depose him. Ludwig, upon receiving the declaration of his incapacitation, was furious and refused to cooperate, instead ordering his loyal palace guards to imprison the commission members. He then tried to appeal to the population, writing a manifesto declaring the government's actions illegal, but it was suppressed before it could be widely distributed. However, the government, under Prime Minister Johann von Lutz, had already declared Prince Leopold, Ludwig's uncle, as regent. A second, larger commission arrived 2 days later, on June 12, successfully overpowering Ludwig's remaining resistance and formally taking him into custody. This moment marked the official end of his reign and the beginning of the regency, bypassing Ludwig's direct authority entirely. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we delve deeper into the story of King Ludwig, we'll examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to his downfall and the precise legal maneuvers that removed him from power. But for now, let us examine the turning point and the ways in which it contributed to the king's tragic demise. The turning point was a moment of great drama and political tension, marked by Ludwig's desperate resistance and the government's decisive action. The government, having secured the Arschliches Gutachten and facing a financially ruined and politically detached monarch, saw his incapacitation as the only way to safeguard Bavaria's future. They used the declaration of his insanity as a legal pretext to formally install Prince Leopold as regent, thereby seizing control of the state. As we delve deeper into the story of King Ludwig II, we begin to uncover a darker truth. The king's profound mental health struggles were indeed severe, yet they were strategically exploited by his government. His cabinet, led by Prime Minister Johann von Lutz, was primarily driven by the escalating financial crisis caused by Ludwig's debts, which threatened to destabilize Bavaria, and a desire for political stability within the newly formed German Empire. The Arschliches Gutachten, the medical certificate declaring Ludwig insane, was compiled by Dr. Bernhard von Gudden without a single personal examination of the king. It relied solely on second-hand accounts, many from disgruntled servants or political opponents, making its scientific validity deeply suspect. This document then served as the pretext for his deposition, allowing the government to portray him as a dangerous madman. This was not merely concern for a sovereign, but a calculated power play to take control of the government and to manipulate the succession for their own political and economic gain. But the king's deposition was not the only dark secret that was hidden behind the scenes. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to the king's downfall, we'll also explore the ways in which his deposition was a politically motivated maneuver. The darker truth is a complex and disturbing one, marked by moments of political expediency and the subversion of due process. The government saw Ludwig's mental state as an opportunity, rather than solely a tragedy. They used his perceived madness as a means to consolidate power under a regent and resolve the kingdom's pressing financial woes. The human cost of King Ludwig II's downfall was immense. The immediate and most tragic consequence was the simultaneous death of both King Ludwig and his physician, Dr. Bernhard von Gutten, whose bodies were found in Lake Starnberg just hours after Ludwig's deposition. Gutten, entrusted with the king's care, became inextricably linked to his patient's mysterious fate, fueling decades of speculation and unanswered questions about their final moments. Ludwig's mother, Queen Marie, was particularly devastated by her son's downfall and subsequent death, spending the rest of her life in profound grief and never truly accepting the official suicide verdict. The family itself suffered further. Ludwig's brother Otto, the next in line to the throne, was also declared mentally incapacitated and remained confined for life, ensuring Prince Leopold's regency would be prolonged. This meant an entire generation of the Wittelsbach line was effectively removed from direct power. The advisors and political figures involved, while securing the kingdom's stability, forever carried the burden of their role in the king's tragic end, with some facing public scorn and whispers of complicity. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to the king's downfall, we'll also explore the personal and collective trauma that rippled through Bavaria. The human cost is a tragic and devastating one, marked by moments of sorrow and regret. Those who orchestrated his removal were forced to confront the devastating consequences of their actions, realizing too late the profound personal and dynastic cost of their political maneuvering. The cover-up surrounding King Ludwig II's death was as complex as it was swift. Immediately following the discovery of the bodies of Ludwig and Dr. Bernhard von Gutten in Lake Starnberg, the government moved quickly to control the narrative. The official explanation was pronounced as suicide by drowning, with Gutten heroically attempting to save the king. However, significant inconsistencies immediately arose. King Ludwig was a known strong swimmer, and the autopsy report, overseen by medical professionals loyal to the new regency, noted no water in his lungs, a critical detail often associated with drowning. Furthermore, Dr. Gutten's own autopsy was minimal and did not adequately address marks on his body that suggested a struggle. Key witnesses were quickly silenced or their testimonies were dismissed as unreliable, and access to Berg Castle and the immediate scene of death was severely restricted. The objective was clear: to stabilize the state, legitimize Prince Leopold's regency, and prevent any scandal that could further undermine the Bavarian monarchy. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to the king's downfall, we'll also explore the concerted effort to control information. The cover-up is a complex and disturbing one, marked by moments of deliberate obfuscation and manipulation of facts. The government, now under the control of Prince Leopold and Minister Johann von Lutz, saw the swift imposition of an official narrative as paramount to securing their newly acquired power and ensuring the kingdom's future stability. The investigation into King Ludwig II's downfall was, in reality, a carefully managed official inquiry designed to confirm a predetermined narrative rather than uncover unbiased truth. Following the tragic discovery in Lake Starnberg, the government's primary focus was to formalize the regency under Prince Leopold and present a definitive cause of death to the public. The cornerstone of this investigation was the Ärztliches Gutachten, the medical certificate compiled by Dr. Bernhard von Gutten and his colleagues, which declared Ludwig insane. This document, based on indirect testimonies and not a direct examination, served as the primary justification for his deposition, and subsequent reports largely supported the suicide theory. Accounts from the king's personal servants and former courtiers were selectively used to bolster the official story, while any dissenting voices or contradictory evidence, such as the initial observations questioning drowning as the cause of death, were downplayed or ignored. Crucially, the official inquiry did not conduct a thorough, impartial examination of the circumstances surrounding the deaths of Ludwig and Dr. Gudden, leading to persistent historical ambiguities. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to the king's downfall, we'll also explore the limitations and biases inherent in the government's inquiry. The investigation, such as it was, became a tool for political consolidation, marked by the suppression of alternative explanations. The government, now led by Prince Leopold, was intent on closing the chapter on Ludwig's erratic reign quickly and cleanly, using the official findings to legitimize their actions and move Bavaria forward. The false answers that were given to explain King Ludwig II's downfall were numerous and varied, serving to obscure a more complex and unsettling truth. The official narrative, immediately promulgated after the discovery of the bodies in Lake Starnberg, declared Ludwig's death a suicide by drowning, with Dr. Bernhard von Gudden heroically perishing while attempting to save him. This was a convenient, albeit highly suspect, explanation. However, this official story immediately faced skepticism due to Ludwig's known strength as a swimmer and the absence of water in his lungs, as noted in some accounts. This contradiction fueled alternative theories among the public and historians, suggesting murder orchestrated by political rivals, an escape attempt gone wrong resulting in accidental drowning, or even a violent struggle between Ludwig and Gudden. Each of these theories, from suicide to assassination, served to simplify a deeply intricate situation. These false answers or simplified narratives were actively promoted by the government, under Minister Johann von Lutz and Regent Prince Leopold, primarily to quell public unrest, legitimize the swift change in power, and protect the monarchy's image. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to the king's downfall, we'll also explore the competing narratives and the motivations behind their dissemination. The false answers represent a strategic attempt to control public perception, marked by the deliberate downplaying of inconsistencies. The government sought to establish political stability and secure Bavaria's place within the German Empire, even if it meant sacrificing the full, unvarnished truth of Ludwig's tragic end. The closest truth to what really happened to King Ludwig II is a complex and disturbing one, lying at the intersection of his profound mental health struggles and calculated political opportunism. Ludwig indeed suffered from a progressive mental illness, displaying clear signs of paranoia, delusions of grandeur, and an increasing withdrawal from his royal duties, which genuinely rendered him unfit to govern effectively. However, the government's intervention, spearheaded by Prime Minister Johann von Lutz, was not solely an act of benevolent concern. It was heavily influenced by the kingdom's crippling financial crisis, exacerbated by Ludwig's extravagant spending and the urgent need for political stability in Bavaria. Crucially, the Ärztliches Gutachten, the medical certificate used to declare him insane, was compiled by Dr. Bernhard von Gudden without ever directly examining the king, relying on second-hand testimonies that could easily be exaggerated or politically motivated. The circumstances of his death in Lake Starnberg, alongside Dr. Gudden, remain ambiguous. While officially deemed a suicide, persistent questions about Ludwig's strong swimming ability, the lack of water in his lungs, and the unexamined injuries on Gudden's body suggest a more tumultuous end, possibly a struggle, an attempted escape, or even foul play. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to the king's downfall, we'll also explore the balance between his genuine illness and the political forces that exploited it. The closest truth suggests that Ludwig was both a victim of his own mind and a pawn in a larger game for control of Bavaria, culminating in a mysterious death that continues to defy a singular, definitive explanation. The final betrayal of King Ludwig II was a cruel and devastating sequence of events that unfolded in his last days. Following his deposition on June 12, 1886, Ludwig was forcibly removed from his beloved Neuschwanstein castle and transported under guard to Berg Castle on the shores of Lake Starnberg. He was effectively a prisoner in his own smaller residence, under the direct care and surveillance of Dr. Bernhard von Gudden and a new staff loyal to the Regency government. His remaining personal attendants were replaced, cutting him off from any sympathetic contact. The ultimate act of betrayal occurred on the evening of June 13. Despite the gravity of the situation, Ludwig was allowed to take an unsupervised walk by the lake with only Dr. Gudden as his companion. It was during this seemingly innocuous stroll that both men vanished, only to be found dead hours later. This inexplicable lapse in security, allowing the deposed king and his sole keeper to wander freely, coupled with the ambiguous circumstances of their bodies being found, forms the heart of the final betrayal. The government's failure to protect Ludwig, or perhaps its complicity in a more sinister plot, culminated in his untimely and mysterious demise. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anyone imagined. As we examine the complex web of psychological and emotional factors that contributed to the king's downfall, we'll also explore the profound breach of trust that defined his final hours. The final betrayal is a complex and disturbing one, marked by the loss of his freedom, the suspicious circumstances of his death under the state's care, and the swift official narrative that sought to bury any lingering doubts. The legacy of King Ludwig II's madness is a complex and enduring one, extending far beyond the whispers of court intrigue. While his mental state provided the pretext for his deposition, his ultimate fate secured a paradoxical immortality. His magnificent castles, Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, and Herrenchiemsee, once symbols of his financial ruin and perceived insanity, are now among Germany's most popular tourist attractions, drawing millions annually and generating substantial revenue for Bavaria. His story has become a romanticized myth, the fairy tale king, influencing art, literature, and famously inspiring Walt Disney's Cinderella's castle. This romanticization often overshadows the political realities of his downfall. However, scholars and the public continue to debate the true circumstances of his death and the ethical validity of his deposition, ensuring that the darker truth remains contested. While his removal brought immediate political stability to Bavaria, his enigmatic persona and tragic end cemented his place as one of history's most fascinating and misunderstood monarchs. His legacy is one of a reclusive visionary whose personal struggles and extravagant dreams became intertwined with a nation's history, whose captivating castles draw the world, and whose unsolved death continues to resonate as a profound mystery. If this kept you up at night, subscribe. We post dark history every week.